Hello everyone, what's up and welcome. Today's Thursday, which is just coincidentally become the talk about random stuff, vlog, chatty thing day. So that's exactly what we're going to do again today. So today we're going to be talking about what makes a good Overwatch map. What's the difference between good map design, bad map design, at least in my opinion. So there aren't too many maps made for Overwatch compared to a lot of FPSs, like Counter-Strike has had hundreds of maps made for it between all of its iterations. Same thing with Call of Duty. But Overwatch just has a few, a small handful. So we're going to take a look at them, see. Now, I don't think that any of them are really super amazing. I don't think that any of them really do everything right. But we're going to look at the bad, the good and the bad of a few different maps here. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is map layout. Now, that's, of course, the skeleton of the map. That's the bread and butter. That's what makes a map what it is. Now, I think that something very important is choice. You don't want a linear map. You don't want something that's always going to be the same. And Eichenwald does that very, very well at the very, very beginning. When you first spawn, there's a choice. You can say you can either go straight down the road here, or you can take this little side path that brings you to this house, up the stairs, for a little bit of a different perspective. And so right off the bat, you have that choice. Two choices when you spawn on the attacking side. Now we're going to skip over this next part and go to the beginning of the next section of the map, which is the payload section. So as your team respawns and goes through this gate, again, you're presented with a few different, this time 3 different options. You can go straight through the castle, straight up the stairs, and straight to the left. And again, that's very good. You're presented with a bunch of different options straight out of the gate. It's interesting for you as the player and as a spectator, if you're looking at it from an esports perspective. Next, we have Dorado, one of, in my opinion, the best maps in the game. Again, right when you spawn, you're presented with 3 different options, and all of them do pretty different things. You can go underneath here, an underpass, up, which is like a flank around to that area. You can just come straight down the road, obviously, pushing the cart straight through. Or there's also this side flanky area where you can go up and do a little flank in the back there. So right off the bat, presented with 3 choices. By the way, the new camera is super, super nice to use. It's way better than the old camera with this recent updated the spectator camera. And again, as you come into the beginning of the next part of the map, when you respawn, you have that. You have the main road, and you have this side area. So again, lots of different options. Very, very good. But next we have King's Row, and I can already hear the hate train choo-chooing in my general direction, but as you spawn, if you look, there really aren't too many options. If you go through this door, you just go straight up the street, and here you are at the main only choke point, really. If you take this other path, this is really kind of pointless. There's nothing even back here. This doesn't do anything because you just wind up at the exact same place again. And same with if you go this way. If you go this way, you just go down the street, and again, you're in the exact same place. It's a little bit different. You have a little bit more access to this theater area. But even here, if you go through this entrance, it's very, very similar to just going through the main gate anyway. No matter what, you're going to be pushing through this area. So for that reason, I think that the starting area of King's Row is not very good. In fact, I think that most of King's Row is just not very good in general. It was one of the first maps developed, and it was one of the first maps out in the beta. Lots of people played it on it for a long time, so that's why a lot of people like it. But compared to a lot of the more interesting maps like Dorado and Numbani, I think that King's Row is actually pretty lackluster, and we'll go into that as we talk more about the various elements of map making. So let's go a little bit more into map layout. So I said that it's important that you have choices in the beginning of the map, and Numbani doesn't really do that for you. You have all these little side passages and these houses and stuff, but they're really pointless. Pretty much all of them lead up into this one area. But so that I don't think is very good. But here is where we get into the next point, which is going into the actual point. Because remember, Overwatch only has 1 point, so it's not like Counter-Strike that has that built-in dynamic of 2 points. You need to really, really, really be careful with how you make your maps. So if you look at the various entrances that Numbani has into the point, we have quite a few, but they're all different, and they have their strengths and weaknesses. So for example, this underpass area is quite good. However, you can hear any players walking underneath, if you're on the stairs up there, which almost every team has someone up there. And plus you walk out into this really nasty choke area where your team can easily just get choked out and spammed out by AoE and the whatnot. You also have this area, which has the benefit of being a very, very short path onto the point with relative safety, because right when you get here, bam, you're immediately on the point. It's very, very short. But the downside is that you have to walk up here into this, again, narrow choke point. And then we have the other two paths. So we have this path that leads straight onto the point. Plus, if you have mobility heroes, you can kind of get a foothold up here on the catwalk. Plus, it gives you very, very easy control of this big health pack here, which is actually, health pack control can be important. You have a very wide open entrance straight onto the point, but you have the downside of not having the high ground. And then we have this last area, which is this flanking route around. And this has the benefit of being kind of open. It's not too choky. Plus, you can get the high ground a little bit. You can kind of go around to that back area. But the downside of this is that it's just such a long walk. So it can be easily telegraphed, especially if you bring your entire team here. You start on the low ground. So all of these entrances have their own unique flavors to them, their own strengths and weaknesses. And teams need to use multiple entrances, mix and match, and the defenders have to be looking at multiple entrances in order to succeed, which makes a very interesting and dynamic match to play and to watch. And it makes each match on Numbani feel unique and different, and that's a really important effect that you want to get when designing or making a map. Now, a map that does not do this very well is Eichenwald. We already went over this, how the beginning is good, but then everything funnels into this one single place to go in. Yeah, there's this little side area, but that's not really an option. Everyone has to come in through here. Unless you have some sort of special, like super special mobility option, you can do these gimmicky things over the house or around the side, but those are just gimmicks. Those aren't really real options in the map, and they require very specific heroes. You should have lots of options that don't require, like, oh, you need a Genji or a Pharah to actually utilize those options. It's good to have those little flavor flanks for specific heroes, but your entire map's design should not revolve around flanks that require, again, certain heroes. Because on Eichenwald, everyone has to go through this one choke. And then, yes, after that it splits off, but this and a lot of people who play this map and even watch this map get frustrated by this one archway because there are no options. It's not interesting. It's just whoever gets in and can plow the most damage and ultimates and whatever into the choke point wins. And that doesn't make for very interesting gameplay. And it kind of makes every point A of Eichenwald seem almost the same. One last thing about map layout, because again, this isn't Counter-Strike. The defenders don't have to really rotate from like one bomb site to another bomb site. So it can be difficult to make the actual defending aspect of it interesting. And in maps where the defenders can easily just look at one point and be done with it, that's not very interesting. But at the same time, you don't want it to be too hard. You don't want there to be so many entrances that defenders just have to plain guess and just stretch their resources way too thin. So Dorado actually does it quite well because you have this entrance here and this entrance over here that the defenders have to be aware of. So they need to actually stretch their resources a little bit to cover this and this. Not too much. It's not too difficult. You can still do it. It only requires one lurker or so to be over here. But it does put a little bit of tension on the defenders to be looking in different directions. Plus, there's this back thing over here that you need a support or some other passive type of hero to be monitoring. And so Dorado, I think, is a good balance between putting pressure on the defense, putting that tension where you need to be looking in different directions, really looking out for where the opponent's going, but at the same time, it's not so crazy that the defenders are just at a disadvantage and they have to guess, kind of like the beginning areas of a lot of these maps. All right, so we're done with the layout. Now let's go over a couple other things that makes a map good. So something I think is really important is that each room, each area, but particularly the rooms, are unique and they have their own unique style. So it doesn't just all blend together in a blah. And King's Row kind of does that. All the rooms in King's Row and all the buildings kind of look the same. So it does all blend together. But in Dorado here, we can see that this room here has its own unique style. Pretty interesting furniture, that window there. Pretty interesting and unique style. Same thing with that window there as well. And then when we go into this room, it's much more like homey. It has kind of the beat up wood floors and the green furniture. The furniture color is different. And then as we go into these rooms, you see the really brilliant art pieces. This is much more cleaner. It looks almost like a museum-esque. And then we go in here, and it's a bank vault that's way different, a completely different style entirely, different floor. Everything's much cleaner, much more industrial looking, or like modern looking rather. And then you go in here, and now we're very modern, technological. So each area of Dorado is very, very unique, and not just mechanics-wise. I think it's important that each room has its own special little niche in terms of how you have to play around it. Kind of like this room has the staircase to play around. This room has the triple entrances to play around. So all the rooms have different mechanics to them, but I think thematically it's important to have them all look distinct so that when you're in room B, you know it's room B because it definitely looks different. You don't want everything sort of blending together and looking the same. Another thing that's important is that the pathing is all smooth. You don't want like little jutting things and little props to get caught on everywhere. And this is something that Dorado a lot of times actually falls short on. Like for example, if you're fighting around here and oh look, I just got caught on this pot for no reason. Why is that there? Or like this furniture here can be kind of like sometimes you can just walk over it no problem, but other times you can get stuck on it. So if you're fighting around the furniture, suddenly you can get stuck on the edges, and it's just a mess. There's lots of places in Dorado you can be walking around like these things over here are an example of something you can get caught on for no reason. Just things like that. In the beginning here, we can see like this little thing juts out. So if I'm backing up, then what am I stuck on? Oh, it's this little jutting thing. Now the way to fix this, and a lot of things are actually like this, Blizzard has done this to a lot of props, just not everything, is so like take this hover bike for example. If I run into it, I kind of slide off. Even though I'm running into it, it just sort of just pushes me off like that. So if I back up into it, I don't just get snagged on nothing for no reason. You can see that some things though, like this sign here, doesn't do that. If I back up like this, oh, what did I get caught on? Oh, the sign. And it's destructible too, so it's random whether sometimes it's going to be there, sometimes it's not. So that's the sort of thing that definitely takes away from a map. The next thing is that it's very important for the map to definitely be optimized for gameplay. And I don't mean like optimized like graphics wise. I mean put gameplay first. So for example, if you look at here, we are at Watchpoint Gibraltar, and actually Blizzard does this very well for almost all of their maps. I can't think of any place where they really do this badly with the walls. They're mostly plain, pretty much one color with maybe a little bit of accent so that players stand out and they don't blend in. You can see that the walls of most of the maps in Overwatch are actually relatively plain. They could have probably a lot more detail, like you can imagine all sorts of artsy stuff, like maybe pipes and stuff on the walls, but those are omitted intentionally, and that's good because, you know, there's this orange here because this is normally pretty shadowy. Maybe it'd be a little bit difficult to see players, but because of this orange stripe, it's not as big of a deal. And you can see that all the walls are kind of plain like this, so that's quite good. However, not just walls. Especially as games get more and more modern and the lighting gets crazier and crazier, we have issues with that. So a really big issue on Watchpoint Gibraltar, and my lighting settings are on low. If you have like high lighting settings, then this is just you need to wear sunglasses to play this game. Yikes. Ew, that looks so bad, and I'm sure if you played Watchpoint Gibraltar, you know exactly the feeling of coming up here, looking up, and you're blinded by the sun. And it's really difficult to see people. So this is something that really should be fixed on Watchpoint Gibraltar. Because remember, I'm on low light settings, and it's this blinding. People who play on regular light settings literally can't see anything at all. And same thing up here. It's very, very bright, not very nice to look at. So just things like that. Make sure that, it looks beautiful. It looks really, really cool. Like, that's a cool screenshot to take, especially if I put the graphics settings up. But for gameplay, not so good. Dorado, again, despite being a map that I really like the layout and general design of, has this issue in certain areas, particularly this first point. It's just so busy as far as the walls go. Like there's all these colors and all this stuff and all this crap going on and the lights in the sky. So oftentimes if you're fighting in this first area of Dorado, now you don't like ultra notice it when you're playing, but it can be difficult to track players in this first part of Dorado because the background is just so complicated. It's not that smooth, nice, just clean surface that you see on a lot of other areas of Blizzard maps. Finally, and this kind of goes back to the layout, but this is more of a payload specific thing. Each part of the map needs to be interesting enough for the defending team to defend in. And Dorado does that pretty well, actually. So this part of the map, while not being super popular as an area to defend, is actually quite defensible. You have the area up here, the high ground. You can peek from that corner. So there's actually a bunch of interesting places to defend from. Again, even though teams usually don't defend in this area, it is an interesting spot to think about. Again, as we go into the choke point, obviously an interesting spot to defend. Keep moving up. This area is an interesting spot to defend for the defenders. They can defend back here, use this cover, use the building, and also they can stand on this high ground as well. So another place that would be pretty cool to defend from. Here, and I'm just going to go through the entire map here. Again, high ground, defenders can defend here, and throughout the entire map, they can defend through all of this. And as we come through, they can defend here and all the way through. So on Dorado, almost every part of the map is an interesting defensible area where something can actually happen. Watchpoint Gibraltar suffers from this issue. When you first spawn, there's these random buildings on the side, but they're pointless because they don't actually do anything to defend the payload, and so it's completely undefensible. This bridge, again, not very good. Like teams stand up here to sort of poke, but again, they can't really jump. It's hard to jump down, so most teams just wind up pushing the cart for free all the way up until this point. So this is the only area that almost anyone ever defends in Gibraltar, because the entire rest of the map before this is just completely, there's nothing to even defend. It's not really interesting enough. And then as we go through here, this entire area is pretty much undefensible. You can do some little kind of a little bit, but not really. Again, the first place you can really start defending is up here. And as we go through here, we get the same issue. This last part of the map, this is all just pointless. There's no way you can defend any of this up until you get to about this point. So half of Gibraltar is just wasted space that's not interesting and doesn't really contribute anything to the map. But anyway, I know I didn't talk too much about King of the Hill maps. That's probably going to be a topic for another time, or maybe you guys can discuss it in the comments or whatever. Let me know what you think about it. Do you think that I was right? Do you think that you like my criteria for a good map? Do you agree with me that King's Row is maybe not that good? Probably not. I'm probably going to get people disagreeing with me on that. But anyway, I have a new mini-series out on Twitter where every day, every other day, like pretty frequently, I'm going to put out 1 minute little tip videos. And the theme for now is going through each ability for each hero. So for example, yesterday I did Anna's Biotic Grenade. Today I'm doing Diva's Shift, Diva's Rocket Boosters. And we're just going to go from there. Again, 1 minute, just a little short thing, some tips, some information like that. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in my content, you might want to go check that out on Twitter. The link is in the description. Or if you just want to follow me on Twitter in general, again, link is in the description. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. Maybe even had a little bit of fun. So stay positive and have a great day. Peace out, guys.